Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Josh from Porter Square Books here with Cersei. Um, Say hi, Cersei. I'm reading you tonight's bedtime story. I'm going to be reading again from the dreamed part, though if you were around for my first reading from the dream part, that actually won't help you a whole lot, as this next section doesn't really refer back to that original section. I'm reading from it again for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's an amazing book, and I'm not getting a chance to sell it to any of you in the store, so this is the best I can do at the moment. Two, like the first time around, where it was about dreams, and I thought it'd be make it for a fun bedtime story. This next section is actually all about books, and actually about a specific type of very special relationship that readers or a specific reader can develop with a book. Um, so the character we're going to be hearing from is named Penelope. She is an author of a work that isn't named, but in the world is very famous. She's making tons of money off of it, and she is in some kind of halfway house recovery place type thing, like a religious kind of space called Our Lady of Our Lady of Our Lady of. And she is thinking about the most important book in her life, which is Wuthering Heights. Penelope also believes that you can essentially have a soulmate that is a book. There is the idea that there is one book out there for you, and that book is in fact only for you, and no one else who reads it can have the same experience with it as you can. Some people find their book, some people don't. And she was lucky enough, Penelope was lucky enough to find her book when she was 9, after she watched a telenovela version of Wuthering Heights. So I'm going to read a passage that interacts a lot with Wuthering Heights. And in fact, in a way, I'm going to read the entirety of Wuthering Heights to you in the context of this passage. But if I know Rodrigo Fresan, I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure anyone does. If you are a Wuthering Heights fan, you'll probably see him play with the plot and narrative a little bit in a way that I certainly don't have the tools to appreciate. So again, I'm going to be reading from the dream part. We're going to be interacting with Wuthering Heights. We're going to be thinking about books and our relationships to books. Ready to go, sirs? Okay, great. So this is from The Dreamed Part by Rodrigo Fresan. At Our Lady of Our Lady of Our Lady of, Penelope had been forbidden to get anywhere near Wuthering Heights. They have forbidden it for her own good, they explained. And she wants to understand the value of such treatment, really, but she can't wrap her head around how someone could come to the conclusion that, therapeutically, the thing that makes you happiest could end up causing you harm. And true, Wuthering Heights is a toxic book with a highly contagious power. A book that transcends borders and languages, because what it sets out and carries along and pushes through to the end of the road is a universal feeling. To have once felt a love like that. To feel a love like that. To know you'll never feel a love like that. But don't get confused. She explains it like this. For Penelope, Wuthering Heights was never a recreational drug of the kind that distracts you from the woes of the world. No, for her, Wuthering Heights was always her reality, clouded by the fog and wind of everyone else's reality, so much less entertaining and passionate, so much more poorly written, and so plagued with orthographical errors. But it doesn't matter. She doesn't miss it. She doesn't need it. She doesn't need the object. She knows the novel by heart. And now, Penelope is like one of those human books wandering the woods, like in that other novel in which all ink-marked paper was burned for fun. Penelope can recite Wuthering Heights from beginning to end, from that opening where Lockwood enters the scene and stage with 1801. I have just returned from a visit to my landlord, the solitary neighbor that I shall be troubled with. This is certainly a beautiful country. In all England, I do not believe I could have fixed on a situation so completely removed from the stir of society. A perfect misanthrope's heaven, and Mr. Heathcliff and I are such a suitable pair to divide the desolation between us. That closing when all of them are already in their graves, and Lockwood... Spoiler alert. I don't think I really need to get a spoiler alert for Wuthering Heights, do I? Well, sorry. Are already in their graves, and Lockwood departs with a... My walk home was lengthened by a diversion in the direction of the kirk, when beneath its walls I perceived decay had made progress, even in 7 months. Many a window showed black gaps deprived of glass, and the slates jutted off here and there beyond the right line of the roof to be gradually worked off in the coming autumn storms. I sought and soon discovered the 3 headstones on the slope next to the moor, the middle one grey and half buried in heath, Edgar Linton's only harmonized by the turf and moss creeping up its foot, Heathcliff's still bare. I lingered round them under that benign sky, watched the moths flutter along the heath and harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how could anyone ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth. Yes, word for word, line for line. All off the cuff, and with no respect for paragraph breaks or page order. Penelope pushing paragraphs together, mixing voices, blending views and landscapes and time, and, every so often, inserting herself, as if piercing a membrane, as if lifting a veil to see better and closer up, as if the text of the novel were like that informational ticker at the bottom of the screen on the evening news, live extras and the latest breaking news, which Penelope knew and anticipated to perfection, yet never failing to surprise and move her. Wuthering Heights, rising in the chasms of her brain, changing from the language she read it in for the first time to the language she read it in later and forever, with the help of a dictionary. That's how Penelope learned English. Leaping from the heights to the cumbres and back to the Porocoso to the Wuthering. Running through the fog and the wind and the rain of those pages and discovering that the rain and the wind and the fog always speak the same language, a language everyone understands. And there, in the middle of the storm, all those words, arranging and disarranging themselves like spiraling gyres of fog that sometimes slip away from Penelope like smoke between her fingers. But she chases them down and traps them and wraps them around her again, there where she always wanted to be and will never want to leave. Lines she returns to again and again when she feels everything is falling apart, immovable feelings that transcend time and death and to which she clings with the same tenacity others cling to psalms and verses, despite the fact that, in the moment of its publication, various horrified critics might have described Wuthering Heights as, quote, a Bible of the infernos, and would have wondered how it was possible its author hadn't succumbed to the consoling temptation of suicide after birthing such a somber aberration. What do they all know? What does anybody know? And the only thing Penelope knows for sure, when she feels a black wind lashing or the sun of injustice shining in the sky, when others resort to reciting a long credo or repeating a brief mantra, is that she sits down in a corner and in a low voice, lips moving, repeats, with variations, more or less this. Winter 1801, and a man named Lockwood arrives to Wuthering Heights to arrange with the owner, one Heathcliff, to rent a neighboring house, Thrushcross Grange. And yes, here we go with these oh-so-strange yet unforgettable names. And Heathcliff is likely the meanest man that Lockwood has ever met, but provokes in him certain curiosity. And then a snowstorm, and Lockwood finds himself obliged to spend the night at Wuthering Heights, and his room comes with a ghost who asks to be let in because she is lost on the moor. The ghost of Catherine Linton, or whatever surname she prefers among her various surnames. And Lockwood screams, and everyone screams, and when that awful night is over, Lockwood sits down to talk with a full-service housekeeper, Ellen Nellie Dean, a woman whose raison d'etre and whose purpose in life is that of awaiting the arrival of some stranger to whom she can tell everything that happened in that house, with the same precision we never entirely trust in tourism guides. And what she has to tell is the bellicose and shadowy saga of the Earnshaws and the Lintons, and Nellie, war correspondent, always moving from one battlefield to another, from one house to another, has spent years reporting the hostilities, ever since Mr. Earnshaw brought home the 7-year-old orphan Heathcliff, who is immediately hated by the young Hindley and adored by the young 6-year-old Catherine. And soon the girl and the boy are inseparable and go running around together across the Wuthering Heights. But years later, when Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley returns from college with his brand new wife, Frances, and turns Heathcliff into a servant to be tortured. But Heathcliff doesn't mind the humiliation and mistreatment, so long as he can keep running off with Catherine, wearing boots or barefoot, races without starting or finish line, up and down between rock and heath, and one night they arrive at Thrushcross Grange, and through the window they spy on the precious and far better dressed and combed young Lintons, Edgar and Isabella. And the guard dog bites Catherine, and Catherine finds herself obliged to convalesce there for some 5 weeks. A little too long, if you ask me. More than enough time for the young Catherine to fascinate the young Linton. Well, alone, Heathcliff is having a harder time than ever at Wuthering Heights, where Frances dies, giving birth to Hareton, and Hindley, turning to drink, behaves more and more despotically with Heathcliff and Catherine, who confesses, to Nellie, of course, that though the love of her life is Heathcliff, better that she marry Edgar, which sometimes happens, and a destroyed Heathcliff departs Wuthering Heights forever. But, as sometimes happens, an adolescent magnate and offers no explanation. As sometimes happens, he returns stronger and transformed into a rich man of 18 years, an adolescent magnate, and offers no explanation regarding where his fortune comes from, but soon reveals where it's all going and what he'll devote it to with enthusiasm and Hamlet-esque calculations. Heathcliff, revenge! In order to take over Wuthering Heights, winning it in a game of cards against Hindley, who was a castaway with too many bottles and no message. And then Thrushcross Grange by marrying Isabella, Edgar's sister, and thereby found a sort of Heathcliff land he'll reign over with Catherine when she realizes once and for all they were born apart only to die together. But after intense arguments, because here, unlike in other novels of the period, people argue and don't dance and definitely don't drop hints with word games and veiled comments, Catherine falls ill and never really gets better, though just before dying and accusing Heathcliff of killing her, she gives birth to a daughter whom, to complicate the already exceedingly complicated matters, she names Catherine. And the crying of the newborn mingle with the living dead wailing of Heathcliff, calling out to the ghost of Catherine, who haunts and curses and torments him just as she did when she was alive. Behavior which ends up being too much for the already excessively punished Isabella, who flees to London and there gives birth to Linton Heathcliff, and suddenly it's as if everything is starting over again. For the next 13 years, Nellie Dean becomes the tutor of the young and happy Catherine II at Thrushcross Grange, where her father takes very special care to make sure the young girl knows little or nothing about Wuthering Heights and about the ogre residing there. But her mother's daughter, Catherine II, escapes on expeditions up the cliffs and arrives to Wuthering Heights just as her mother once arrived to Thrushcross, and there she meets Hareton, the son of Hindley, but really a kind of weathered and half-wild Heathcliff II. And in London, Isabella dies, and the young and mentally and physically ill Linton is brought to Thrushcross Grange by his uncle Edgar. But Heathcliff demands his son live with him, perhaps so he can detest him from closer range, the way he already detests Hareton. And on one of her wild rambles, Catherine II encounters Heathcliff, and later Hinton, with whom, using the complicit milkman as messenger, she initiates an amorous correspondence. And when Edgar and Nellie go to bed, Catherine II escapes to Wuthering Heights to visit Linton, whom Heathcliff wants to marry to Catherine II, and thus make him the owner of Thrushcross Grange, apparently convinced that everyone will die before him, and he'll survive even the extinction of the sun and the stars, master of the universe. And Heathcliff convinces Nellie and Catherine to move to Wuthering Heights, where he keeps them prisoner and forces Catherine II to marry Linton in a marriage that, though its author doesn't care, is completely illegal and without any validity in terms of property. But those details don't apply in the entirely extra-legal environment of Wuthering Heights. And soon Edgar dies, and Linton dies. And Heathcliff now has everything he wanted, including his daughter-in-law as a slave, and now Lockwood has arrived to rent Thrushcross Grange. But after hearing everything Nellie has told him, he decides having a landlord like Heathcliff might not be the ideal, and maybe it would be best to move along. And he returns to London, though everything seems to indicate that he, too, has become an addict of Wuthering Heighting. And 6 months later, he's back to visit Nellie, who catches him up on everything that happened in the episodes he missed. She tells Lockwood what he has missed, and yes, Catherine II has taught Hareton to read, like Jane taught Tarzan, while Heathcliff, last man standing, as often happens, now can only think of the dead, of those who he realizes beat him by setting the trap of having ended their lives before him. And there are many, and so many, and above all the others, the hysterical Catherine I, whose ghost has even rejected him, and Heathcliff dies. And it's hard, spoiler alert, again, do I really need to worry about spoiling Wuthering Heights? And Heathcliff dies. And it's hard to say if he dies happy or if he's happy to die. And Catherine II and Hareton inherit both houses and plan a wedding for New Year's Day. And before leaving, Lockwood takes a small stroll through the cemetery and visits 3 tombs. In order of appearance, Catherine I, dead at 18, and Edgar, dead at 39, and Heathcliff, dead at 37. And maybe amid such epiphanic farewell thinking, he says to himself that there's something strange in all that Nellie has told him, that there's something in her story that doesn't entirely come together, that it's all very imprecise, and that if it were up to him, the first thing he would do is convince Hareton to dismiss her, and then tell him to go see the world before getting married, and, with the young man far away, court Catherine II and live happily with her until Hareton returns, and here we go again. Amen and Om, and hair, and a great peace descends from heaven, life, abundance, salvation, comfort, liberation, health, surrender, redemption, forgiveness, atonement, openness, and freedom. Shalom. And for now, the storm has passed, until the next storm comes. Penelope has managed to distract the Caffar, and it has already passed, and it won't be long before Penelope has to think that, with the exception of Wuthering Heights, she doesn't want to think about anything anymore, and that there's only one way to achieve this, but many ways to make it happen. So that is our bedtime story for tonight. Again, it's from The Dreamed Part by Rodrigo Fresan. We often think of books as ports in storms, as places we can return to in times when we're troubled. They are mental environments, mental spaces. They are heights. They are forests. They are mansions. They are places. And I don't know if I've ever seen a book besides The Dream Part take that idea, apply it to a specific book, and really show us how that works. I mean, it's something we've all felt as readers, I'm sure, but it's one thing to feel it yourself, and another thing to see someone else put words to it and put it on a page for you to then kind of spend time in yourself. So I hope you enjoy the reading. I hope you have found a port in the storm for this time, whether it's a single book or the books in your life or something else. And we will see you all again next time. Good night.